are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Hello and welcome to MidSouth Matters. I'm your host, Ruth Dunning. It'll soon be a new year with a new session of the Tennessee State Legislature, as well as a new Memphis mayor inauguration and a new city council. We are delighted to discuss both state and local and probably federal politics with one of our favorite guests, Jackson Baker. Mr. Baker is senior editor of the Memphis Flyer and a contributing editor of the Memphis Magazine and the Tennessee Journal. His primary concerns are political coverage and general news, and we are so glad to have him on the show. Welcome back, Jackson.
It's been too long since I've been here, Ruth.
It has,
so
entirely, yes, and we got all kinds of new good things to talk about.
Right. And new digs here.
Right, beautiful new digs and new students coming along beautifully. We want to talk first about the new Memphis mayor-to-be, who we inaugurated shortly. So tell us about him and what to many people may have been a surprise election.
Well, it was a surprise to a lot of people, including myself to some degree, because I've known Jim Strickland for 25 or 30 years. I knew him before he was on the city council. He lost his first race in 2003, won his second one in 2007. Promptly began to be a budget expert and became a guardian of fiscal solvency. That was his main calling card for many years. Way back there, I know I wrote a headline that said Strickland calls for reducing employee salaries. Now,
that's kind of a scary headline.
Yeah, I didn't dig that up, and he would have been dismayed if I had, because he didn't mention a thing about fiscal solvency during this campaign, which is very interesting to me, because for years that's all he talked about. He was the guardian of the exchequer, as it were. And what he ran on this time was the issue of crime, which is always a winner. Everybody who ran for anything mentioned that at some point. Blight, which I think we all recognize as a problem as well, and accountability. And he really got lucky on that last of his third points, because for a long time I was shaking my head thinking, I understand what he means by public safety and crime. I understand what he means by blight. Just look out your window. Accountability, he said, for the first time in city history, we will enforce accountability on the part of our public officials. And I'm thinking, surely there's some method of doing that already, but maybe not. And then you had the Lipscomb affair, and then you had the unfortunate affair involving Deidre Malone and the bid on the contracts he shouldn't probably have bid on. And whether those actually had anything to do with corruption or not in the process, it made people alert to that issue. So all three of his issues were wide open and flaring. And in the meantime, Mayor Wharton, who had 70% the last previous time he ran. Who was expected by a lot of people to be the shoe-in this year.
Including me.
and including me at a certain point. I'll tell you the stages of my change in a minute. He was making one mistake after another. Now, I mentioned the Lipscomb affair. He discovered that his main man, Robert Lipscomb, who had been the city's planning czar for years, under previous Mary Harrington as well as Mayor Wharton, had a past that was kind of shady, and more than that, it was illegal if allegations against him were correct. Now, those allegations to this day have not been proven or prosecuted, but the mayor probably was in a position where he had to act decisively, so he threw off the pilot, as it were. This is the man who had made all the plans of all the developments we've seen for 20 years around Memphis. He was gone, and half the people thought, well, he was decisive. Half the people thought he panicked. When you add that to what happened with the Deidre Malone affair, where he really didn't need to act as indecisive as he did.
Explain that affair.
Well, one of the innovations he has bragged on is cops on cameras on cops.
Right.
So that they can record what's going on when they're on a call, for their safety as well as the safety of the citizen. And there was a contract let to a company to supply these to the Memphis Police Force. And it turned out that the mayor's campaign manager, Deidre Malone, who was an upstanding young woman, had gotten the contract. It was worth $800,000, although it should be noted that very little, about $800,000 was destined for her. Most of it for the services that would be provided. But it created a big stink, and the mayor was faced with a decision. What does he do about this? Here's a potential scandal in the last days of the campaign. You either protect your person and say something like, listen, I have a duty to protect and to extend public contracts to women and minorities, and she's both, and she's one of the best of both. And let it go at that, or say, well, this is terrible, it should never have happened. He tried to do both things. He tried to apologize for her and say, oh, shame on the contract, but he kept her around, and this created, then he made the mistake of calling into a right-wing talk show, of all people to talk to, who blistered him for both sides of the thing. He never recovered from that. Now, I know Jim Strickland thinks he was ahead before then. I know his pollster maintains he was ahead before then, probably so. I think we all had a sense that things were tending Strickland, but that added surely 5 or 10 points to his margin.
Right.
Because he just seemed unable to control a crisis situation. And people extended that backwards to the Lipscomb affair and various other things. People had seen a reduction in core services that had been going on for some time. They definitely saw the loss of benefits by first providers.
Right.
The billboard saying this city is unsafe. And so that crisis atmosphere was there. They just trusted somebody who knew to handle it.
And former Mayor Harrington didn't do him any favors.
Well, it was after the fact, but after the fact, the mayor said he always thought that Mayor Wharton was incompetent, which I thought was unhandsome, because A.C. Wharton had been Harrington's campaign manager at 2 of his races. Now, I do know that in 2007, 2007, when Harrington was getting ready to run for a 5th time, a lot of people were suggesting that A.C. Wharton, then the county mayor, should run against him. And the two mayors had their meeting, the famous meeting at a Midtown restaurant. And I had a chance to interview Mayor Harrington in the so-called exit interview we did on the Flyer. And I asked him, what did you talk about? He said, well, I just sort of warned him that if he decided he ran, I would describe him. And I said, what do you mean describe him? And he said, well, I don't have to do that now. I think the mayor's just described him as he would have described him at the time, the former mayor has. And it's not flattering to A.C. Wharton. And yet we all see Bass Pro and some nice, shiny things that Mayor Wharton has brought to Memphis. We all see the bike lanes. He has made his contribution. I think in the course of time, everything will balance out and he'll be credited for that.
For those things, good, yeah. What about the City Council? Anything new or interesting that's going to transpire
there are
there?
going to be 6 new people who weren't on it
That'll
before.
be new and interesting.
That will be new and interesting. 6 or 7, depending on whether one of the interim candidates who's in a runoff now wins or loses. So it'll be a new council for all intent and purposes. And it's probably, if I can do a little soothsaying here, a little predicting.
Please do.
It probably is going to run to the Strickland prototype. That is, a couple of the guys who are running in runoffs are the same kind of young business type that Strickland appears to be.
Okay, we're going to finish up on that when we come back.
Okay.
We have to take a short break. We'll have more with Jackson Baker when we return. Please stay with us.
Don't worry, 74 people were picked before me in the NFL draft.
To fight childhood obesity, United Way and the NFL are helping kids play at least 60 minutes a day.
Okay, time for the team obstacle course. Yay!
What this place needs is more healthy kids. To get involved or donate, go to unitedway.org/play60.
Now I get it.
How can I help my daughter with her reading?
Searching for help with Dachshund breeding.
No.
Let me try. Sarah's bright, but when she's reading, she has trouble sounding out words.
Playing world music.
What?
I give up.
Wait, I was trying to show you how Sarah feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
Join parents and experts at understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues to help your child thrive.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back to MidSouth Matters. Today's show is focusing on the recent elections here in the Mid-South. Discussing the implications of the results is Jackson Baker of the Memphis Flyer. Welcome back, Jackson.
Nice to be here.
And we were talking briefly about the City Council. Any further comments about the newness of the council, or where you think they'll?
I think that since to my certain knowledge, a couple of the new councilmen, one who's already elected and one who's very likely to win his runoff, had a huge war chest in the 200,000 level, which is immense for a council race, and had great support from some of the pillars of the business elite here in Shelby County. For example, one of Fred Smith's top executives is going to be on the new council, and another fellow who has support from more or less the same source has a good chance of winning. And there are already 3 or 4 people who are very responsive to the business elite. So I don't think business is going to be wringing its hand at these results. I think they see Strickland, they see someone who's amenable to their ideas of social progress, and then the council will please them as well.
Good. What about Strickland's plans? What do we anticipate from him?
Well, the one thing we know he'll do, he'll reinstitute Blue Crush. That's this data-driven way of policing whereby you have statistics that show where crime is occurring, and you put your ready police forces at the ready in those areas. And to do so, if it's necessary, you will go back to hiring PSTs. Those are those civilian people in the brown uniforms who used to assist the police in traffic cases. We had to say goodbye to them because of budgetary reasons. Strickland wants to bring them back, and he thinks he could do it without altering the budget, freeing up all the officers for dealing with violent crime and in the most crime-ridden sections. He will do that, and again, he'll hire the PSTs. He will try to get heavier penalties provided for juvenile crime, because we all remember that, and this is something that probably contributed to his election. Didn't happen in the election year, but in 2014, those were those 2 outbreaks of mass youth violence. One of them at Poplar Plaza, which is at the crossroads of Memphis. Poplar Avenue is Shelby County's main street. Goes from the government center downtown all the way through the elite suburbs of Germantown and Collierville, and hit all kinds of elite Memphis residences along the way. People don't want to see Poplar Avenue become a crime artery.
Crime rate, yeah.
So that scared people. He almost certainly will provide greater protection for areas like that. He's got to raise the numbers of the police. They were at one point 2,400 or 2,500. They've declined to about 2,000. That's because of the lost benefits that happened during this past administration. Because the policemen voted with their feet. They just walked off that job, found new jobs where they had benefits that were more amenable.
Which is perfectly understandable.
Sure it is. And so when I talked to Strickland recently in an interview, I asked him, well, how are you going to get those 400 people replaced that have left for reasons like that? You're not going to raise taxes, are you? No, he's not going to raise taxes. He's going to adjust the budget in various ways, and again, use the PSTs, so the policemen are not going to be doing any animal chasing, and less traffic patrolling, which some people will welcome, I think. Hope we end up safer that way. But more policemen will be available. He hopes to free up 100 or 200 policemen just by doing that sort of thing for action against violence. But he still, and he has a good relationship with the county mayor, who actually gave him sort of behind-the-scenes support. And the county mayor has some influence with the sheriff's department. He used to be sheriff himself.
Say who you're talking about.
Well, the county mayor is Mark Luttrell.
Right.
He's been county mayor for 2 terms. He and Strickland have been very friendly. Mayor Luttrell actually gave Strickland tacit support during this past election. he didn't come out right out and endorse him, but he showed up at his events, and that's a sure sign whenever you see that. And he has, as a former sheriff himself, he has good relations with the current sheriff. I would not be surprised at all if they didn't work out some kind of sharing arrangement whereby the sheriff's people could help the Memphis police out, because that's obviously an area Strickland's bound to do something with. Blighty needs the help of the legislature in providing, enabling a couple of programs he wants to pursue to clean up the streets. And accountability, that's up to him to provide.
Absolutely. Anything else that's you expect the city council or the mayor to do, or shall we move on to the Tennessee legislature?
I think one thing that characterized Jim Strickland's campaign is when he talked about those 3 points: public safety, blight, and accountability. Those were all present tense concerns. I would consider them housekeeping concerns. None of them were the grand visionary sort. He wasn't pitching to a future generation. The mayor was. The mayor was talking about his bike lanes and new projects way down the line. Strickland figured, I think correctly, people are not concerned about that now. They're worried about what's here right now. We've got to take care of that first. Beyond that, I think if Strickland does not develop some sort of grand vision of his own, distinct from those housekeeping issues, then he may find himself the target of an organized opposition 4 years from now, because people do want to see some visionary element at work in the government.
Right. Memphis has not had the problems with attitudes toward the police that a lot of big cities have had. Does the Memphis Police Academy do a better job of training police, or have we just been lucky so far?
Well, we've been lucky, except that we've had a policeman killed, and within a month's time last year, we had a suspect killed, an unarmed suspect killed by a policeman, and then within a month, a policeman was killed by a suspect. So we've had our share of that kind of problem. And the cameras that will be attached to our police from now on will be very useful in dealing with this. So Mayor Wharton is entitled to some credit for getting that sort of thing started. I think Strickland will avail himself of that as well. I think we do potentially have the same problem as other cities in our class. We have to be very wary about this, in fact, especially the racial aspects of things. Now, luckily, we have a police force that is predominantly African-American itself, that this white on black thing doesn't occur that often. A couple of problems we've had are black on black. But I think everybody's alert to the problem, and we'll work it out.
Good, good. Let's move on to the Tennessee legislature that begins a new session after the first of the year. What do you anticipate as interesting or exciting or just mundane events? You know,
mundane, I'd settle for mundane. Given some of the extraordinary things this legislature has done in recent years, such as preventing Germantown from deciding whether its parks and schools should be free of guns. And that I think basically the legislature has still made too many inroads into public local prerogatives, and I fear they will try that again, but I'm hoping that saner heads will prevail.
Good. We'll talk about these saner heads when we come back. Jackson Baker will return for our final segment after this short break. Please stay with us.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 68 children is diagnosed with autism. That's about a 30% increase in 2 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Pretty much a good day for me would be people leaving their hands off of me. I'm always called names. Everywhere that I go, there's always someone calling me names, calling me gay. I've been choked, thrown up against a wall, punched. Nobody's ever tried to help me.
You are watching Germantown Municipal Television, your source for everything Germantown.
Welcome back. We're talking with Jackson Baker of the Memphis Flyer, and we're going to skip. We're going to skip from the Tennessee legislature.
Well, I want to add a couple of things.
Okay.
I think Governor Haslam will make another run at trying to get something like Insure Tennessee passed. And he probably will end up butting his head on a wall again. The governor is a very nice man. He's too nice for his own good, frankly. He lacks the ability to enforce his will when it comes to important legislation like that. And so he'll try again, but it may come to naught. He also has got to figure out how to get a gasoline tax passed. And he had such a bad experience with Insure Tennessee that he won't even propose a gasoline tax per se. He's been going around the state having forums in various places pointing out how our infrastructure needs are suffering and so forth. And he's leaving it up to the people in those areas to say, we need a gasoline tax. I don't think that's going to happen. But for the rest of it, I just hope they leave things alone, don't make things worse up there.
Okay, let's talk now about national politics. At the end of the show, we're going to predict who the candidates will be, the presidential candidates will be. I get to pick who the Democratic candidate will be, and you get to pick who the Republican candidate.
All right.
Okay. Any thoughts as to where we are right now?
Well, as to where we are right now, we're still operating in the shadow of Donald Trump and Dr. Carson, who are these way off the wall possibilities, and they have owed their celebrity, which has ebbed and flowed a bit, over the conventional politicians because people are tired of conventional politicians. And none of the conventional politicians on the Republican side have had much that is interesting or original to say. The best they can say is that they will not shut down the government. They will allow a debt ceiling to be raised as it routinely has to be raised. And that's again like that's the absence of a visionary element. Trump is fun, I'll say that. And we're taping this a little bit ahead of when it shows. I presume he'll still be active in some way by then. Who knows? I think there are a couple of the Republican politicians who are sensible people. I'm not crazy about Jeb Bush's politics, but I think basically he's a sensible man, the former governor of Florida and a member of the Bush family. He was expected to do very well, and he's in the single digits as we speak, and maybe that rises a little. Governor Kasich, John Kasich of Ohio, is the one that fascinates me because he's the one who actually talks about working across the aisle, compromising, and he acknowledges that government has a positive role to play in people's lives. You don't hear that from Republican sources much anymore. And I think this man is a conservative. He is governed that way, but he's governed with a sense of realism. He has done well, I think, in the debates I've seen him in, but the fan meter has not shown a big burst of enthusiasm for him. Maybe that will come. I think in the long run, someone like that will get the Republican nomination. Now, I know
not Ted Cruz.
Well, listen, I went to a Ted Cruz event here locally when he came barnstorming through, and he made the most demagogic kind of statements, and he had a big crowd. All I can say is, at the risk of compromising my objectivity, I hope not. He seems to be on the extreme edge of the Republican Party, whereas not everybody who's running is. I know what you're going to say, though, if you're going to pick a Democratic nominee. Let me see. Would it be Lincoln Chafee? No.
Lincoln Chaffee's gone.
The block of granite is gone. He's fallen of his own way. Bernie Sanders has been fun, but I'll bet you think that Hillary Clinton will be the nominee.
Well, I think Hillary, given the Benghazi hearing, I think probably boosted her over the top if there was ever any doubt about it.
Now, that was an amazing thing because, again, that's some weeks ago now. But what that was a kind of tag team torture imposed
for
by
11 hours.
11 hours by, I'm not sure how many interrogators, but they could take bathroom breaks and go take lunch breaks and come back and beat her up again. She had to sit there for 11 hours taking the most inane, abusive kind of questioning, and she came through it smiling like a champ.
Yeah. I was amazed at Republican columnists who said essentially the same thing you just said.
And she showed a couple of things there. She showed that she can take pressure, but any politician, any presidential candidate must be able to demonstrate they can go through a crisis and end up on the other side looking better after the crisis than before the crisis. I think she definitely did that. She's made some mistakes. I think people have made much too much of this email issue, but I think now with her successful combating of the Benghazi thing, she may be able to do away with that as well.
You know, Colin Powell did exactly the same thing, had his own server when he was Secretary of State, and one of the Bushes did too. I think it was Jeb, although I'm probably dead wrong about that, when he was governor.
And Bernie Sanders, this gentleman from Vermont, the avowed socialist, who seems to be a very engaging presence and has run a very good race, he's benefited her in more than one way. He gave her the semblance of a race. She did not want to look anointed. He ran a good enough race that it made it look like it was a real competition. And not only that, he was so far to her left that she could appear to be much more centrist to middle of the road voters than otherwise. So I think she is handling the competition well, and she needed that competition. But I think your prediction is Hillary Clinton.
It's Hillary Clinton.
I think
yes.
you're right.
And yours is?
Democrats said Hillary. I think she's obviously going to be the nominee and has a good chance of being elected. The Republican side, I'm still hoping someone like John Kasich can get nominated. He would not give me nightmares. Ted Cruz would give me nightmares. Lord knows what Donald Trump would do. I don't think Trump knows.
It would be an interesting presidency. And on that, we'll leave it.
All right.
I'd like to thank my guest and thank you at home for watching this month's edition of MidSouth Matters. If you'd like more information about this or any other show on Germantown Municipal Television, please visit our website at www.gmtvonline.org. That's a long address. Thanks again, and we'll see you next month.